Uh,
All right, so skills, competencies, and knowledge.
Excellent. Okay, so here's the next piece on this one is so you got a chance to put in 10. And I think this goes back to something very similar that Mr. Benson said when it came to the efficiency factors, is that while it does not necessarily, I mean, you can maybe get away with having 9 instead of 10. You could get away with having 7 instead of 10. Having 10 is going to be much, I mean, it's going to help promote you, and have that application do a little bit better. The other thing is that having 10 just to fill 10 and having one that's not very well written, it's not really a competency, it doesn't fit with the standard that you've selected, it doesn't help your case. I'll be honest, it may even hurt your case more than not having one. And the only reason I say that is even if all 10 are there, you're not going to necessarily get the points that you should be if it's not actually tangible to the project. And I'll be honest, as I'm reading them and I'm looking at some of these examples, and there's an example here that we can look at as well. So if we're looking at the worded example here, if it doesn't tie well, and I can find one that doesn't tie very well, or it's just blatantly not tied together, it makes me want to go back, and I now am reading every single one of these a whole lot closer than I probably would have if I had felt like they were really well, I mean, there was at least a tie and there was a good connection between them. That point value is going to change and it's going to go up a little bit the more that I see that connection. So make sure, the biggest thing I can say is make sure that you build that connection and you see that they're connected well. The other piece is that on that front title page, you're able to pick a primary area. That primary area does not have to be directly related to anything. It is completely up to you and the student that you're working with. So for example, you may pick career skills because the career skill component is the stronger of the two of what you developed in a livestock SAE. That's perfectly fine. There is nothing that's going to take points off, and it's not going to be a disadvantage for you if you do that. So I think that that's really, really important for us to keep in mind. The other 5 then can come from any of those areas. So you want to see that then you're able to diversify, and hopefully you're breaking out and showing that there's other areas of that project that you're learning in as well. But there needs to be at least 5 that are coming from that main primary skills, competency, and knowledge area, and from that pathway. So keep that in mind as you're starting to select those, that which one can you most confidently write on, or which one did the student develop the most in. That should be your primary pathway. Okay, and that primary pathway that's going to connect to the application. So if we go back over and we look at this, this is one that I think that as we go through and we look at this example, we'll keep going on the one that is here, is that it needs to lay out and be very specific in how it connects. So for example, again, there needs to be something measurable. I need to be able to see how you actually grew or developed or have knowledge in that area. Don't say that your understanding of something has increased or your knowledge has increased. I can't measure knowledge based on what I'm reading. I can't measure understanding. Very similar to the way we would talk about that in an objective, in a learning objective in our lessons. We can't necessarily measure understanding. And so that makes it a little bit more difficult as well. So try to work really hard on trying to think about how you can actually directly connect what knowledge was gained, what skill was gained, and how you got to the point where there was success in that area, and directly how it connects to the performance indicator. The other thing is that I have seen people that have made it work really well where they've selected the same performance indicator for 2 very different things. We can see if the one of the examples here has that. I don't think this one did, but it doesn't. But I mean, at least I have seen that and it's worked well. If there are 2 very different things that you did, but they relate to that same indicator, that's going to be really easy for you to write on. Write on what the student feels most comfortable with. Where did they think they learned? Where did they develop skill, or where did they develop some of that understanding or knowledge that they have? But be specific in how that works, okay, and what that looks like. Again, in this section, it's really important to have some detail. Not that I'm going to say that this is the easy way or the only way that people look at it, but I can tell you that if you sit down and you open up one of these applications, you're going to be able to tell pretty quickly of how detailed and how much information someone's sharing based on the length that it takes to describe those 10 areas of competency, skills, and knowledge. There are some that all 10 are going to fit on this one page and it's done and over, and there's just very little detail that's included. That one's probably not going to score so well. One that's got the detail and it's a little longer, there's this feeling to the person that's reading them that they're going to actually then have some content to them, and they're going to be able to withstand some of that connection and building that connection. The other thing, as you start to glance at them, some of the people that I've talked to and some of the judges that I've talked to have said that if they see like numbers in there, that helps build some connection. So again, back to that same thing that we talked about with the efficiency factor, numerical values are going to help you actually maybe score just a little bit better on the application, because it's something we can tangibly see and we can see how that is increased or how that has changed. And so that's just something to keep in mind as you're writing these things as well, or this stuff as well, because it really does impact how someone's going to perceive that application in your student's work. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just kind of part of the game, as I like to say, of this actual process. Yes, it's a competition, and yes, I mean, there honestly is a game piece to it. Like, how well can you fill out that application, and how well can you describe what actually happened in the project or in the program within the description of the project as well. So this section, I think it's a lot more of questions or things that we can look at. And I know that maybe I didn't provide as much detail on this section, but I think this is, to me, is one that's really important. But I feel like sometimes this is more self-explanatory if we know that we need to provide that detail. Mr. Benson?
Yeah, I'd like to add in here. One of the parts that I think that teachers often miss in helping their students fill out this section is if we could scroll back up, and Brandon, or where it says contributions to success, to really address that by writing to the prompt, what is it that has made your project more successful? And that's where you can put in the numbers. Because if you talk about environmental conditions, let's say, and let's say that you have created a lambing barn and put in lambing jails and things like that. Now you can talk about, having more live lambs weaned, and you've gone from, 80% to 95% lambs weaned. So I always say, as a result, my project has done this, and you can quantify the improvement which has made your project more successful. And so you need to take that and describe it and what you did, okay? The improvement in your project, and then you finally wrap it back around to how have you made that project more successful? Has it made you more money? Has it made you more efficient? And just say, as a result of doing this, now my project is at this level, and quantify that with that's where you can really use your numbers.
And I think that one of the great ways to do that is to connect them to the efficiency factors that we talked about on the previous page. In some cases, I've read some that the description, because there's a little bit more limited space on some of these. And so you can only add so much detail. So if you can't get all the detail in that you want to provide, this is a great place for you to then add additional information so that we can see how that connection builds. So if I can see that connection then on this page, I may go back and give you an extra point or two on the previous page, because I just wasn't able to see all of that or see how that connected. So again, it's all about how well you can describe.
So let's take number 3, where it says select animals for specific purposes and maximum performance based on anatomy and physiology. Okay, so let's say that you're looking for an animal that's wider based, deeper ribbed, softer flanked, You use EPD values, you know, for faster growth rates. And then at the end, you can say, as a result of using these factors, now my cattle they've went from gaining 2.5 pounds a day to 3.5 pounds a day. And that shows your success, or the project success, for what you're applying in what you've written here.
I agree. And
that's where a lot of, I don't read a lot of that, but people that can wrap it back around get big points with me.
yeah, and I think that if you notice here in number 2, where it even talks about how it reduced the loss of disease by less than 5% in 2014. So at the end of that commentary piece, if you can do that for each year to show how you progressed in that, that's going to carry you a lot of value as well. So it's not always about just the end point of where we are right now, but how did that knowledge and skill and competency continue to grow over time? Because a lot of times I think we think about it just at this end point right now. What do you know compared to what you knew at the beginning? And sometimes that seems really significant, and sometimes it really doesn't. But if we can show that progress over time, to show that it's not been an overnight or an immediate thing, but it's been something that's continually been worked on, it adds a little bit of value to that, into that scoring process as well, because it's all about how did that change that student's knowledge and competency in the area.
I almost feel like sometimes this section really gets kind of swept under the rug by teachers, just because they've gotten to this point, and it's a lot to fill out, being such a big application, that it's just kind of like, oh my gosh, and they don't quite put as much effort into it as they could to make that a really good application. So I mean, being a 26-point part of the application, that's pretty big. So
Yeah.
definitely make sure that you spend some time on this and make these measurable. Melissa Webb had a good comment, you know, in the chat box. She said, I always had students use this part to help tell their story. Maybe they couldn't fit it in other places for whatever reason. And I have them keep in mind and try to get them to fit it in here. So it's
and this is another place, I think that's a great point. This is another place where you may be able to provide some description that helps provide evidence for your budget or income statements as well. There may be something in here that can build that connection in a way that you can write that in. And I promise you, when we don't know where it is, we scour the application and read it one more time, looking for one specific thing to try to help us understand that value. And remember, when you are writing those values, to make sure that you indicate the year. So it's not just about the fact that we bought a trailer for this much money. It was that in 2013, we bought a trailer for this reason, for this much money, to do this. So I think that that's really important. And sometimes we miss part of that, but at least we can find where it's at, and we can find information about it.
Are there any other questions?